Fear doesn't taste like metal. That's what people always say, but they're wrong. Real fear tastes like nothing at all. It tastes like the absence of everything. Like your mouth has forgotten what saliva is, like your tongue is made of sand. She'd been swallowing it for 3 years, ever since she packed her daughter into a rust-eaten Corolla and drove north until the highway signs switched to French. She thought she'd outrun it. She thought the cold of Montreal would freeze out whatever was chasing her. But fear is patient, and on this particular Wednesday night, in the back alley behind the cafe where she bussed tables for $11 an hour, fear came walking toward her in the shape of a man who was leaking blood across the January ice. She almost didn't see him. The alley behind Café Morel was narrow, sandwiched between the kitchen's exhaust vent and a dumpster that hadn't been emptied since the holidays. Margot's was hauling a garbage bag with both hands, her breath coming out in white clouds, her fingers already numb inside her thin gloves. The temperature had dropped to -28, the kind of cold that makes your nostrils stick together when you inhale. She heard the sound first, a wet, dragging scrape, like someone pulling a heavy sack across gravel, then a groan so low it could have been the wind. Margot froze. She'd grown up in Trois-Rivières. She'd lived in Montreal long enough to know that sounds in alleys at midnight were not your business. You threw the trash, you locked the door, you went home. That was the rule. But then she saw the trail, a dark, glistening line cutting across the snow, black in the amber glow of the security light. And at the end of that line, slumped against the brick wall beside the recycling bins, was a man. He was big. Even crumpled on the ground, she could tell he was well over 6 feet. He wore a charcoal overcoat that probably cost more than her rent, now soaked through with something darker than slush. His face was pressed against the brick, one hand clamped against his ribs, the other splayed on the ice like he'd been trying to push himself up and failed. Margot's first instinct was to run. Her second was to scream. She did neither. She stood there, the garbage bag dangling from her fist, and watched the man's chest rise and fall in shallow, uneven lurches. He was alive. Barely. Go inside, she told herself. Call 911. Let someone else deal with this. She turned toward the kitchen door. She made it 3 steps. Then, from the front of the cafe, she heard another sound. Her daughter's voice, high and clear through the glass. Maman, I finished my coloring. Can I have hot chocolate? Colette. 5 years old, sitting in the last booth by the window with her coloring books and a juice box, waiting for Margot's shift to end. Safe, warm, oblivious. Margot looked back at the man in the snow. Blood on white, the steams of his breath getting thinner. She swore in Quebecois French, the kind of words her grandmother would have slapped her for, and dropped the garbage bag. Hey, she crouched beside him, keeping a full arm's length between them. Hey, can you hear me? The man's eyes opened. They were dark, almost black in the low light, and for a half second, they were completely feral, the eyes of something cornered, and she watched the animal panic drain away, replaced by confusion. Who, he started, then coughed. Blood flecked his lips. Who are you? I'm the idiot standing in an alley at midnight, Margot said. What happened to you? The man tried to laugh. It turned into a gurgle shot, he said, twice. He moved his hand from his ribs, and Margot saw the wound, a ragged seeping mess just below his left side. His other hand moved to his thigh, and she saw the second one. The trouser leg was saturated, the blood pooling beneath him, already half frozen at the edges. Margot's stomach flipped, but she didn't look away. 3 years of nursing school before she'd dropped out. 3 years of anatomy labs and clinical rotations. Her hands remembered even when her brain was screaming at her to leave. I'm calling an ambulance, she said, reaching for her pocket. No. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. For a man bleeding to death, his grip was terrifyingly strong. No ambulance, no police, no hospital. They'll find me. His jaw clenched, my brother. Margot stared at him. She knew she should pull away. She knew that a man who didn't want hospitals or police was a man whose problems would become her problems. She knew. But she also knew what the cold did. At -28, with that much blood loss, he had maybe 20 minutes before hypothermia finished what the bullet started, and she was looking at his face, the sharp cheekbones, the jaw dark with stubble, the faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow, and she was thinking about another face, a different man. Her father slumped in the bathtub of their apartment in Trois-Rivières, his wrists open, because the loan sharks had given him 72 hours and nobody had helped him either. Nobody ever stand? Margot heard herself say. The man blinked. His grip loosened on her wrist. Maybe, he said. Then stand. My car is 40 feet away. I'm going to get you off this ice. She didn't wait for him to argue. She ducked under his arm, bracing his weight against her shoulder. He was heavy, impossibly heavy, and he smelled like expensive cologne and copper and winter. She staggered, her boots slipping on the ice, and for a terrible second she thought they'd both go down. But he pushed. Something in him, stubbornness, survival, whatever fuel keeps dangerous men breathing, ignited, and he forced his legs to move. They lurched together toward the back door of the cafe. The kitchen was dark, the grill already cleaned, the stainless steel counters gleaming under the emergency exit light. Margot kicked open the door and dragged him inside, lowering him onto the prep counter. "Stay," she ordered, like he was a dog. She locked the back door. Then she ran to the front. Colette was still in the booth, crayons scattered across the table, drawing what appeared to be a purple cat riding a spaceship. She looked up when Margot burst through the kitchen door. "Maman, is it time to go?" "Not yet, baby." Margot kept her voice even, though her pulse was hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. "I need you to stay here, okay? Put your headphones on. Watch your show. I have to help someone in the kitchen. Is it a customer?" Colette asked. "Sort of." Colette considered this, then nodded with the solemn acceptance that only 5-year-olds can muster. "Okay, but can I have hot chocolate? When I'm done, I promise." Margot kissed the top of her daughter's head, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo and wax crayons, and then turned back to the kitchen. The man hadn't moved. He was lying on the prep counter, his breath fogging the stainless steel beneath his face. His eyes tracked her as she came in. Behind the mops and the industrial-sized bottles of bleach, she kept a tackle box. It wasn't a first aid kit, not really. It was the box she'd assembled during her residency, the one she'd taken when she left. Sutures, hemostats, scalpels, surgical tape, a bottle of betadine. She'd told herself she kept it for emergencies. Maybe she'd always known an emergency would come. She snapped on latex gloves. She cut away his shirt with kitchen shears, peeling the blood-soaked fabric from his torso. She paused. His body was a map of violence. Scars crisscrossed his chest, old burns, knife marks, a puckered bullet wound above his hip that had healed badly. This man had been hurt before, many times, and he'd survived every time. "You've done this before," Margot murmured, probing the wound in his ribs. The bullet had gone clean through. She could feel the exit wound in his back. That was good. One less extraction. Born for it, the man rasped. His teeth were gritted, the muscles in his jaw jumping. The thigh was worse. The bullet was still lodged there. She could feel it against the bone, sitting in the muscle like a hot coal. She irrigated the wound with betadine, and the man arched off the counter, a strangled sound escaping through his clenched teeth. "I need to take this out," Margot said. "I don't have anesthetic, I have bourbon." "Bourbon? In a French cafe? The owner's from Alberta." She pulled a bottle from the shelf above the coffee maker and handed it to him. He drank like a man who hadn't tasted water in days. She worked fast. The extraction took 8 minutes that felt like 80. The man didn't scream. He went rigid, every vein in his neck standing out, his hands gripping the edge of the counter so hard the metal groaned. When she finally pulled the bullet free and dropped it into a bowl with a clink, he let out a breath that sounded like it came from the bottom of a well. 22 stitches. She closed the thigh wound in neat, precise rows, her hands steady even though the rest of her was shaking. She dressed the rib wound, wrapped his torso in gauze, and taped everything down. Then she stepped back, peeled off the gloves, and threw them in the trash. "You're not a waitress," the man said. His voice was slurring, his eyes half-lidded. "I'm a waitress tonight," Margot said. "Who are you?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, Dominic Ravenna. The name hit her like a slap. She'd seen it in the news. The Ravenna family ran half of Montreal's underworld. Dominic Ravenna was the head of the family, the man the papers called Le Loup Gris, the Grey Wolf, and now he was bleeding on the counter where they sliced tomatoes. Margot felt the room tilt. She gripped the edge of the sink. "You're Ravenna," she said. "The Ravenna." "I'm the one who's alive because of you," Dominic said. "That's what matters right now. What matters is that whoever shot you is probably looking for you. And you're in the cafe, where my daughter is sitting 20 feet away eating crayons." Something moved behind his eyes. Not fear, but awareness. Guilt, maybe. "You have a daughter," he said. "Her name is Colette. She's 5, and if anyone comes through that door because of you, I will kill you myself. Do you understand me?" Dominic looked at her. Then he nodded, slowly. "I understand." "Then don't move, don't make a sound, and when I come back you're going to tell me exactly what's happening so I can decide whether to throw you back in the snow." She left him there and went to Colette. Her daughter had her headphones on, watching something on the tablet, her lips moving along with the words. Margot sat across from her and put her hands flat on the table to stop them from trembling. Colette pulled off one headphone. "He's resting," Margot said. "Was he sad?" "Why do you think he was sad?" Colette shrugged. "His eyes looked like yours do sometimes." "When you think I'm not looking." Margot's throat closed. She reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "He's going to be fine, baby." Dominic was still on the counter, but he'd propped himself up against the wall, his color slightly less corpse-like. He was watching the door like a man expecting the devil. "Talk," Margot said. Dominic exhaled. "My brother, Gianni, he hired a crew from Toronto. They hit me after a meeting tonight. My driver is dead. My 2 guards are dead. Gianni wants the family. He's been planning this for months and I was too blind to see it. Why can't you go to the police? Because half the police in this city cash checks with my family's name on them. If I show up in a hospital, Gianni's people will know within the hour. They'll come for me and then they'll come for anyone who helped you." "Yes." Silence settled between them like snow. Margot looked at the blood on the floor. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was 12:47 in the morning. "I have a place," she said. "My aunt's house in Charlevoix. It's been empty since she passed. 4 hours north. No neighbors. The road isn't even plowed in winter. You're not serious." "I'm deadly serious. You can't stay here. The morning crew arrives at 5, and you can't go anywhere else, because you can barely sit up. So you're going to lie down in the back of my car, and I'm going to drive you to a house in the middle of nowhere, and you're going to heal. And then you're going to leave, and we're going to pretend this never happened." Dominic studied her. In the harsh fluorescent light, stripped of the alley's shadows, she saw him register her properly for the first time. The dark circles under her eyes, the calluses on her hands, the way she held herself, not with confidence exactly, but with the hard-edged endurance of someone who had been carrying too much for too long. "Why?" he asked. "You know who I am, you know what I am. Why help me?" Margot turned away. She picked up the mop and started cleaning the blood off the floor. "Because my daughter saw me go into the alley," she said quietly. "And tomorrow, she's going to ask me if the sad man got better. And I need to tell her yes. I need her to live in a world where people help each other, even when it's stupid, even when it's dangerous. Because the alternative is a world where people bleed out in the snow and nobody cares, and I won't raise her in that world." She wrung the mop into the bucket. The water turned pink. "My father killed himself when I was 15, Margot said. She didn't know why she was telling him this. Maybe because he was half-conscious and wouldn't remember. Maybe because she needed to say it out loud. He owed money to people, bad people. He begged for help. Nobody helped. Nobody even looked at him. He died in a bathtub on a Tuesday afternoon and the neighbors complained about the smell. She leaned the mop against the wall. So I help. Even when I shouldn't. That's the rule." Dominic was quiet for a long time. Then, "What was his name?" "Martin," Margot said lair. "I'm sorry," Dominic said, and for the first time his voice didn't sound like a mob boss. It sounded like a man. The house in Charlevoix sat at the end of a gravel road that disappeared under 2 feet of snow. It was small, cedar-shingled, tucked into a stand of birch trees that looked like bones in the moonlight. The St. Lawrence was a dark line in the distance, frozen solid along the shore. Getting Dominic inside nearly killed them both. He was 6'3" in solid muscle, and Margot's was 5'5" on a good day. They stumbled through the snow, his arm over her shoulders, Colette trotting ahead with a flashlight narrating the journey. "Maman, there's a big rock. Careful. Also, I saw a bunny. Also, is the man sleeping?" "He's resting, Colette. He's very heavy for a resting person." Inside, the house was freezing. Margot's got the wood stove going while Dominic lay on the couch, shivering, his face grey. She covered him in every blanket she could find, her aunt's quilts, hand-sewn, smelling of cedar and lavender. Colette stood at the foot of the couch, studying Dominic with the unblinking seriousness of a scientist examining a specimen. "You have a boo-boo," she declared. "Several." Dominic said, "My mum fixes boo-boos. She fixed my knee when I fell off the swing. She used the special bandage with the dinosaurs on it." Dominic looked at Margot. "Special bandages," he said. "Don't encourage her," Margot muttered, but a ghost of a smile crossed her face. Over the next 10 days, the house in Charlevoix became something none of them expected. It became a home. Dominic Ravenna, a man who had run a criminal empire from a penthouse overlooking the city, who had ordered operations that reshaped the balance of power across 3 provinces, was now lying on a floral couch, being served chicken soup by a 5-year-old in footy pajamas. "More soup?" Colette asked, holding the bowl with both hands, her tongue poking out in concentration. "I couldn't possibly. You have to eat. Maman says eating makes the boo-boos go away. Your mother is very bossy, I know," Colette said proudly. "She's the boss of everything." And Margot's was. She changed his bandages twice a day, her hands clinical and sure, her voice clipped. She made him drink water even when he wanted whiskey. She propped his leg on pillows and told him if he tried to stand before she gave permission, she'd re-break it herself. But in the quiet moments, when Colette was asleep and the wood stove crackled and the snow fell in thick curtains outside the window, something shifted between them. They talked. Not about the mob, not about the danger. About small things. "What did you want to be?" Dominic asked one night, his voice low. "A surgeon," Margot said. She was sitting on the floor, her back against the couch, a mug of tea cooling in her hands. "Pediatric. I wanted to fix kids. What happened? My father died, my mother fell apart, I had to work. Then I had Colette, and work became surviving. And the father, Margot's just tightened, gone before the pregnancy test dried, a small-time dealer from Hochelaga. Charming until he wasn't. I haven't seen him in 4 years, and I pray every night it stays that way. Dominic was quiet. Then you deserved better. Margot laughed, short and sharp. We all deserve better. That's not how it works. He reached down and touched her shoulder. Just his fingertips, light as snow. Margot went still. She didn't pull away. Colette, meanwhile, had decided that Dominic was not a guest but a project. She brought him drawings, elaborate scenes involving cats, dragons, and what she called the Snow Queen's castle, which bore a suspicious resemblance to the Charlevoix house. She read him stories from her picture books, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the couch, narrating with great enthusiasm and loose interpretations. And then the princess said to the monster, "You're not scary, you're just lonely." And the monster cried, and the princess gave him a cookie. The end. Dominic stared at the ceiling. "I think I might be the monster in this scenario," he said. "Monsters don't eat soup," Colette informed him. "You're just a big person with boo-boos." On the 6th day, Colette asked the question. She was sitting on the edge of the couch, carefully applying bandages from Margot's kit to Dominic's arm, not because he needed them, but because she was practicing. She had lined up a row of stuffed animals as her other patients. "Mr. Dominic," she said, pressing a strip of tape with great precision, "are you a bad person?" Margot, standing in the kitchen doorway, felt her breath stop. Dominic looked at the little girl. He could have lied, he could have deflected, but Colette's eyes were clear and steady, and in them, Dominic saw something he hadn't seen in years. Someone who actually wanted the truth. "I'd done things that hurt people," he said carefully. "I told myself it was for my family. But some of it was just because I was angry and I didn't know how to stop." Colette nodded, processing this. "My friend Sabine hit me at school once," she said. "She was angry because I had the red crayon. But then she said sorry and we shared the crayons." Dominic blinked. "Did you say sorry to the people?" Colette asked. "Not yet, even if it's hard, especially if it's hard. That's what Maman says." Dominic looked at Margot. She was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, tears running silently down her cheeks. "Your mammon is right," Dominic said softly. On the 8th night, they found them. Margot was washing dishes. Colette was asleep in the back bedroom, buried under 3 quilts. Dominic was doing slow, careful exercises by the stove, testing his leg. The sound came from outside, an engine, distant but growing. On a road that no one used in January, Dominic went rigid. "Kill the lights," he said. His voice had changed, the warmth gone, replaced by something cold and precise. Margot didn't hesitate. She killed the lamp. She killed the stove light. The house plunged into darkness, lit only by the blue glow of moonlight on snow. Dominic moved to the window. He peered through the curtain. Down the hill, headlights were bouncing along the gravel road. 2 vehicles. Moving fast. "How?" Margot whispered. "Your pharmacy," Dominic said. "You used your card to buy gauze in La Malbaie." His jaw was tight with self-reproach. "I should have given you cash. This is my fault." Margot's heart was a fist, slamming against her ribs. She thought of Colette, sitting playfully 10 feet away. She thought of the sound her daughter made when she laughed, that high, hiccuping giggle that sounded like bells. "There's a cellar," Margot said. Her voice was steady. She didn't know how. "Stone walls. My aunt used it to store preserves. The entrance is through the pantry. Take Colette. Lock yourselves in. Don't come out until I come for you." "No," Margot said. She went to the hall closet. Her aunt had been a hunter. Margot pulled out a bolt-action rifle and a box of cartridges. She checked the chamber with hands that didn't shake. Dominic stared at her. "You know how to shoot? I grew up in Trois-Rivières. My uncle took me moose hunting every autumn since I was 12. She racked the bolt. "You can barely walk. I can shoot. We do this together." "Margot, this isn't a moose." Margot looked at him. The moonlight caught the angles of her face, the set of her jaw. "You think I don't know that? Those men are coming here because of me, because I helped you. If they get through that door, they won't leave witnesses. My daughter is in this house, so you're going to tell me where to stand, and I'm going to shoot anyone who comes near her." Something changed in Dominic's expression. Not admiration exactly, recognition. He was seeing her, perhaps for the first time, not as the waitress who saved him, but as someone forged from the same fire. He nodded. Back corner of the kitchen, sight line to the front door and the window. Stay low. Margot positioned herself. Her heart was hammering, but her hands were stone. Dominic took the hunting knife from the kitchen drawer. It wasn't much, but it was something. The vehicle stopped. Doors opened. She counted footsteps in the snow. 4, maybe 5. Then, from outside, a voice she didn't recognize. "Dominic, we know you're in there. Gianni wants to talk." Dominic said nothing. A crash. The front window shattered inward, glass spraying across the floor. A canister flew in hissing, smoke. Margot's eyes watered, but she held her position. She'd hunted in rain and snow and freezing wind. Smoke was just weather. A figure appeared in the broken window frame, climbing through. Margot squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The figure dropped back with a shout, clutching his arm. Chaos erupted. Gunfire tore through the front of the house, splintering the doorframe. Margot's dropped flat, crawling behind the kitchen island. She racked another round. Dominic had moved. Even wounded, even limping, he moved like smoke. He was at the side door when a man kicked it open. Dominic drove the knife into the man's wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Dominic picked it up. Now they had 2 weapons. The next 3 minutes were the longest of Margot's life. She fired twice more through the front window, keeping the remaining men pinned behind their vehicles. Dominic, armed with the pistol, covered the side entrance. Then, through the ringing in her ears, Margot heard it. A helicopter. The deep, rhythmic pulse of rotors cutting through the winter air. Dominic heard it too. A savage grin split his face. He pulled a satellite phone from his coat, the one Margot had found in her aunt's emergency kit and given him days ago. "Sandro," Dominic said into the phone, "we're hot. Light them up." The helicopter crested the tree line. A spotlight blazed down, flooding the yard in white scrambled. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker, "Hands where we can see them." It was over in 60 seconds. Dominic's loyalists, the ones he'd been quietly contacting all week, swarmed the property. The surviving men were zip-tied and thrown into the snow. Margot laid the rifle on the kitchen counter. Her hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was leaving, and in its place was something vast and hollow. She walked to the pantry. She opened the cellar door. Colette was sitting on a crate of her aunt's strawberry preserves, hugging a stuffed rabbit. "Mayman, is the noise over?" Margot scooped her up and held her so tight that Colette squeaked, "It's over, baby. The noise is all done." Was it thunder? Something like that. Dominic appeared in the pantry doorway. He was bleeding again. His stitches had torn, and he looked like he crawled out of a grave. Colette peered at him over Margot's shoulder. "Mr. Dominic, you have new boo-boos." He laughed. It was the first time Margot had heard him truly laugh. It was ragged and exhausted and real. "I do, Piccolina. I really do." 3 weeks later, Dominic Ravenna walked back into his world. Margot heard about it the way everyone in Montreal heard about it, in fragments. Whispers at the cafe. Headlines in the Gazette. The Ravenna family had restructured. Gianni Ravenna had been found in a warehouse in Pointe St. Charles. The details were unclear. The message was not. The grey wolf was back. A lawyer visited Margot at her apartment the next day. He carried a briefcase and a manila envelope. Inside the envelope was the deed to a 3-bedroom house in Outremont, a trust fund for Colette's education, and a check for $2 million. Margot tore the check in half. She put the deed and the trust fund back in the envelope. She told the lawyer to leave. She went back to work. She wiped tables. She smiled at customers. She picked Colette up from the gardery and made pasta for dinner and read 3 bedtime stories. And she waited. She didn't know what she was waiting for, exactly. But every time the cafe door opened, her eyes went to it. Every time she told herself she was watching for danger. She was lying. It was a Thursday evening, 2 months after the alley, when the door chimed and the cafe went quiet. Dominic stood in the entrance. He wasn't wearing the overcoat. He was in a dark wool sweater and jeans, a cane in his right hand. The limp still there, though probably permanent. His face had healed, but the scar through his eyebrow was new and would stay. He looked completely wrong in the cafe, among the mismatched chairs and chalkboard menus and the smell of fresh croissants. He looked like a storm that had wandered indoors. He walked straight to her. "You tore up the check," he said. "I don't want your money," Margot said. She was gripping a coffee pot like a weapon. "I told you that while I was pulling a bullet out of your leg. I bought the building." Margot blinked. "What building? This one? And the one you live in? The whole block? You can't just buy people's lives, Dominic." "I'm not buying your life," Dominic said. He took a step closer. "I'm trying to tell you that I went back to my penthouse, and I sat there with everything I've ever wanted. Money, power, territory. And the only thing I could think about was your daughter's voice reading me a story about a princess and a monster." Margot's hands trembled on the coffee pot. "Dominic, I'm a dangerous man, Margot. I know that. But I spent 10 days in a house in Charlevoix, and it was the only time in my life I didn't feel like a monster." He reached out and took the coffee pot from her hand. He set it on the counter. He took her hands. "I don't want you to fix me," he said. "I want you to be the reason I fix myself. And I want to be the wall between your daughter and every dark thing in this world, Mr. Dominic." Colette had been coloring in the back booth. She slid off the seat and ran toward them, her sneakers slapping against the tile. She slammed into his legs, wrapping her arms around his knees. Dominic let go of Margot's hands. He crouched down, slowly, painfully, and opened his arms. Colette threw herself into them. Did you slay the monster, she asked. Yeah, Dominic said, his voice rough. But you know what? The princess was right. The monster was just lonely. Colette pulled back and looked at him with those devastating 5-year-old eyes. Did you say sorry? Dominic looked up at Margot. She was standing above them, tears running down her cheeks, her arms crossed, her jaw set, fighting the thing she'd been fighting since the alley. I'm saying it now, Dominic said. Margot looked at the man on his knees in her cafe. She saw the darkness. She saw the scars. She saw the blood she'd mopped off 2 different floors. But she also saw the man who'd thrown himself between a bullet and her daughter without a second's hesitation. The man who ate soup from a 5-year-old's hands and called it the best meal of his life. The man who asked the name of her dead father and meant it. I'm not moving to Outremont, Margot said. Dominic smiled, the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. Then I'll move here. I'll learn to make espresso. I'll mop the floors. You're going to mop floors? I'm going to mop every floor in this city if it means I get to be near you. Margot looked at her daughter, clinging to this man like he was a life raft. She looked at the cafe, the chipped tables, the buzzing lights, the crooked chalkboard menu she wrote in her own handwriting every morning. She took his hand. Fine, she said, but you're doing the dishes, every night, non-negotiable. Dominic Ravenna, the Grey Wolf of Montreal, the man whose name made prosecutors lose sleep, stood up with a 5-year-old on his hip and a waitress holding his hand, and he laughed. The sound filled the small cafe like something that had been locked up for a very long time. Deal, he said, and outside the snow fell over Montreal the way it always does, silent, relentless, covering everything in white. But tonight, through the frost-edged window of Café Morel, the warm light spilling onto the sidewalk looked less like a flicker and more like a beacon. The wolf had found his home. And God help anyone foolish enough to knock on the door.